Thank you for coming to our panel discussion on this dialogue beyond the destruction day. And I would like to start with some introductions. And first of all, Mr. Shaheen Nasser, who is Palestinian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shaheen Nassar. I am a Palestinian activist of 10 years. I'm a member of something called the Irvine 11, where 11 students were arrested for protesting the Israeli ambassador at the University of California, Irvine. I am also a community organizer for the Council on American Islamic Relations and a freelance journalist.
My name is Daniel Majors, and
Use that mic.
Yep. My name is Daniel Majors, and I am a community college instructor. I teach philosophy, critical thinking, and world religions, and I consider myself an earthling and a humanist, and I just look forward to the conversation today.
Hello, everyone. I am Mahmoud Harmoush. I am the Imam and Religious Director of the Islamic Center of Riverside, right here by UCR. I'm glad to be with you. This is the second time in this blessed place. Thank you.
And I'm Lee Greer again. I'm an evolutionary biologist, have taught anthropology, and I do work in the Enlightenment and the history of cosmology. I'm an educator and also interested in world religions and cultural interchange. And a humanist as well. Thank you. Would you please tell us what has happened, Shaheen, to your family within this recent times?
Absolutely. And I'll even take it a step further back by explaining some of the misfortunes that kind of led up to this moment. So I'm sure Dr. Lee covered this. For most of y'all, in case y'all didn't know, there's something that Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, the catastrophe, which refers to the mass expulsion of 3/4 of the entire Palestinian population. The indigenous population of Palestine was essentially evicted in 1948. And some of them were confined to these ghettos or reservations, you might call them the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, of which that's where my family hails from, the Gaza Strip. But anyways, what I wanted to mention is that every Palestinian you've ever come across, more than likely, growing up, I would hear these dates, 48, 56, 82. These would be dates of escalations of violence. But when I was a child, we would just hear them in reference to like when people immigrated or came to the US or went here or there. I didn't realize that, that essentially our people were fleeing pogroms and bombings and all these escalations and hostility. So as I usually say in my workshops to other Palestinians, younger Palestinians, I remind them that they are, of course, they're not limited to this. They're beautiful, incredible, creative, wonderful beings. But in addition to that, they're also living, breathing souvenirs of some of the greatest crimes in recent history. And so my family originally escaped, my grandparents escaped the Nakba. They fled to Kuwait. They're originally from Gaza. And I wanted to mention that what sort of kicked off the escalation in my activism when I got arrested for the Irvine 11 was when one of my cousins died in 2008 with Israel's first bombing of the Gaza Strip since the siege began, I believe in 2006 or 2007, I forget which. Since then, nearly 10 relatives of mine have died in these ritual acts of humiliation in which a military superpower, Israel, one of the strongest ranking militaries in the world, the largest fleet of F-16s outside the US, largest fleet of Apache helicopters outside the US, bombs a besieged and defenseless ghetto without any military, defenseless population with homemade means of self-defense. They don't really They don't have a formal military, no Navy, no Air Force, nothing. And every couple years, as a tactic for Israeli politicians to win some popularity in a population that's excessively racist towards the indigenous people, Israeli politicians will launch an offensive against Gaza to, I believe one Israeli official stated taking us back to the Stone Age or something like that, bombing us back to the Stone Age. Anyways, most recently, I've lost 3 members of my family in the most recent bombing of Gaza, including Bassan, who's pictured behind me, Bassan al-Besos. She was 8 years old. She wanted to be a doctor, and we never got to meet because Israel is an apartheid, officially designated as an apartheid system. So Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, which is Israel's largest non-government organization, as well as, more importantly, that Palestinian people have been commenting on this for decades without being heard, that Israel has been officially designated as an apartheid system, as a system that practices ethnic and racial segregation. I remember an anecdote from Noam Chomsky's book in which an Israeli politician and a Palestinian lawyer teamed up just on the concept that there should be absolute racial and ethnic equality in the state of Israel, to which the Israeli courts responded that it would be antithetical to the purpose of the state of Israel for racial and ethnic equality. My personal tragedy is indicative of larger systems of oppression, and those systems are settler colonialism, which I interpret that as racism expressed through land theft, that you're not human enough to warrant living on the same land as we do. You're not human enough to inhabit the same land that we do. So I mentioned settler colonialism and illegal military occupation. Some of the context that we don't talk about, or it's kind of hazy, is that everything that Israel is doing is contrary to international law. So from the siege of Gaza to the illegal occupation of the West Bank, all of these are illegal activities designed for a single purpose, and that is the dual purpose of territorial expansion and the elimination of undesirables. And Israel, I usually describe it in the 3 E's, how Israel has traditionally treated Palestinians: expulsion, exploitation, and extermination. Those are the major 3 ways in which Israel has dealt with Palestinians. On exploitation, I wanted to mention that I think in the 80s and 90s, again from Chomsky's book, he mentions how 3/4 of Israel's labor force were Palestinians. So the people, sweeping up hallways, mopping up corridors, ladling sloppy joes in cafeterias were often Palestinians. And it was the exploitation of Palestinian labor was such a huge scandal in Israel, never mentioned here in the US press, never mentioned in popular discourse when it comes to Palestine, Israel, and the US. But it was so horrible that it prompted some Israeli Jewish allies to publish a pamphlet, raising awareness about Israel's exploitation of Palestinian workers, called Uncle Ahmed's Cabin. And it was just about how the horrible living conditions and horrible quality of life that was endured by Palestinian workers. And also, I guess also child workers as well. That's something that never penetrated the American discourse on the topic. But another thing I want to mention is my personal experience when I got arrested for my protest, which was well within the norm of student protest on campus. I was apprehended by 4 police officers and taken to a back room where we noticed there was riot gear. There was billy clubs, there was masks and everything. And the form of protest that we were doing was a form of protest we imitated from other students who did the same thing for different causes and had none of the repercussions that we faced. But what I wanted to mention was the escalated kind of, or elevated kind of response to us is not uncommon. And it's sort of symptomatic of a larger problem of the dehumanization of Palestinians. And what I wanted to specifically touch on, when we even talk about the massive civilian casualties that are mounting in Gaza Strip, including my young cousin, may God rest her soul, we always emphasize women and children because it's sort of implied that the innocence of Palestinian men is already forfeit. So for decades, there's Professor Jack Shaheen who did a study on, he did a documentary called Real Bad Arabs, real as a movie reel. And in most of these depictions, Arab men were often villains, and not just villains, dehumanized villains, like two-dimensional manifestations of evil. And so we kind of have this societal issue in which we see Palestinian and by extension, Muslim and Arab men as expendable villains, as existential threats to Western civilization, as monsters that need to be put down. And to the contrary, what I see when I look at images of Gaza, I see there's one that was made really famous, a turbaned man who was holding his grandchild, his dead grandchild, and calling his grandchild the soul of my soul. And in honor of his grandchild's memory, he would tend to the injured children of Gaza. You know, this man could have given up on life. He's literally living in a concentration camp that is cut off from food, water, medical care, everything. You know, it's hell on earth. I can't imagine a worse situation than what the people of Gaza are going through now. And this man sort of champions the true spirit of Muslim men and Arab men and Palestinian men that unfortunately mainstream media will never give airtime to. That we are creatures of compassion and kindness. We are human beings with dignity. We through our, even this act of nobility, this act of compassion is an act of resistance, because as I've mentioned, you know, there's sort of been some kind of another way I also describe the situation. I also mentioned that the state of Israel kind of hires the same PR firms that market for, you know, some of the mainstream beverages and, you know, like Pepsi and Coke and all this stuff. So what I kind of define Israel as a pariah state that markets its image to the American public. So that's part of the reason you haven't heard any of this. So it's, you know, so like apartheid South Africa with a Facebook group or a Twitter page to somehow justify the unjustifiable. And on that note, I want to mention that one common talking point is that Israel has a right to defend itself. Unfortunately, this is just a slogan with no merit. Under international law, legally occupied people have more of a right to armed resistance than their illegal occupier. So what Israel is doing, its siege on Gaza, the West Bank, these are escalations of a pre-existing crime, you know, and have no, you know, are actually in contradiction, in direct contradiction to international law. But I also want to talk about hope and what, in our religious tradition, we feel that someone who has been martyred in an unjust and evil way, the way that my cousin Bassan has been martyred, is that they sort of achieve the highest level that we can aspire to on this earth, and that is paradise. So for them, I'm not worried about the people who've died. I'm worried about the people who are alive, that we have a moral obligation to not cooperate with evil, not cooperate with genocide. I'm going to say that word genocide. I forgot to mention that. It's funny, most of the people that are, it brings great comfort to my heart that so many Jewish scholars and intellects are speaking out on behalf of what's going on right now. Raz Segal, a professor and Holocaust historian at Stockton University, has in Jewish Currents labeled this a textbook case of genocide, indisputable. With genocide in terms of international law, it's the hardest thing to explain is not massive body counts, it's intent. Unfortunately, there's a legal loophole that allows some of the biggest villains in in throughout the world to get away with literally, mass murder, is their inability, or not inability, but this requirement to prove intent. And Israeli officials have been outspoken in describing Palestinians as human animals. As I remember one, this is from actually decades ago, but one Israeli official described his desire to make Palestinians like drunken roaches in a bottle, and usually whenever you have like these comparisons to insects and it's literally dehumanizing. So besides that, what I wanted to say also is, as sad and as horrible and as tragic as this moment is, it's also a moment for unity. It's also a moment for hope. And what I wanted to mention, as I mentioned to my peers on this panel today, prior to European colonization, there's this mythology that there's been a religious war that's been waging for decades and all this stuff. None of that is true. That actually, prior to European colonization, Muslims, Christians, and Jews got along harmoniously on the land. What ruined that harmony was the idea of a racial hierarchy, the idea that certain ethnicities, certain demographics deserve or are entitled to greater rights and greater access to the land and resources. So what I wanted to say is, what we're seeing right now is people take to the streets en masse, and numbers we've never seen before, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at a single protest. What we're seeing is, we've never seen this level, of camaraderie and brotherhood from our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Christian brothers and sisters, who are standing hand in hand with Palestinians out in the streets and saying that we refuse to continue to support these ideologies of racial supremacy, to continue to support genocide, ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism, apartheid segregation, foreign military occupation, that we refuse to contribute to these injustices, and we refuse to allow these injustices to be perpetrated in our name. So although we are witnessing and watching on Instagram Live, watching these things happen, as I speak right now, there's footage being shown about Palestinian children being burned alive with white phosphorus, weapons that have been outlawed since World War II. There's also this great sense of hope and this great sense of unity that has never before witnessed. And I hope it will bring about the end of Israeli apartheid and bring genuine peace and brotherhood and camaraderie to the Holy Land, where we can see Jews, Muslims, and Christians co-inhabit the land as equals, without any system of oppression, having equal democratic rights. And, that means an end to the occupation. That means an end to Israeli apartheid. That means an end to the siege on Gaza. And also, and on our end, that means an end of US complicity in these crimes. So if you get a chance, reach out to your local elected official, demand support for HR 786, which is the resolution calling for a ceasefire. We're just calling a halt to the genocide. We're not even asking for justice. We just want stopping the murder of Palestinian innocent civilians. And also halting the $3.8 billion the United States gives to Israel on an annual basis, mostly, I might mention, in the form of weapons, including white phosphorus. So I think that money could be better spent doing some good for people, rather, purchasing instruments of genocide and mass murder. And with that, I conclude and pass it on to my...
I had a quick question,
Please.
a follow-up question. About Palestinian men. Often we see them in the videos with their bare hands pulling rubble away, trying to rescue or recover people that are under that rubble. Maybe without having eaten well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm really glad that you pointed that out. So it seems that men of color generally are hyper-masculinated only in ways that justify our execution. We're only presented in these like menacing forms whether it's TV or social media, or even just racial mythology that passes on, from regular conversation. What I wanted to say is that these men are starving. The people of Gaza are literally starving. What Israel has been doing, Israel is escalating war crimes. Israel originally had Gaza on a calorie count in which just enough food was allowed to enter Gaza to just barely keep the population barely above starvation, which is in an insane reality, where we're trying to figure out ways to alleviate poverty and starvation in other parts of the world. In Gaza Strip, starvation and poverty are man-made products. They're products of the Israeli government. They're deliberate, and they can be alleviated at any time. But this is a form of collective punishment in which an entire ethnicity has to bear the responsibility for the crimes perpetrated by a few. Anyways, what I wanted to mention is that again, we see the nobility, the bravery, the courage. My courage is inspired by the men and women and children of Gaza. And I think all of ours should be. That despite being defenseless, despite having almost 3 months of continuous bombardment, besides people having, doctors and nurses having to operate by cell phone lights, without anesthetic, without electricity. Despite all this, you have, as you mentioned, Palestinian men digging through the rubble, their hands bloodied, trying to save any life that they can. And so it just goes to show that despite their best efforts to dehumanize us, to display us as, beasts in human form, we still defy this with our humanity, with our compassion, with our kindness, with our courage. And I shouldn't say but their courage, their kindness, their compassion, their nobility. And in many ways, I feel the people of Gaza championed the human spirit.
We have a question there, and then I'll ask Dan to comment some. Yes. Okay, I'll repeat your question. If you make it short, I'll repeat your question for the recording.
And also, where was the here or there? And how many and
So our audience member is asking, when you referred to Jews in the streets and Christians in the streets, and you drawing hope from that, what were you referring to? Here, over there, where?
That's a very good question. So both, actually. So we've had demonstrations from organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, who are tremendous allies to the Muslim and Christian communities. And they have been putting themselves in harm's way, committing acts of direct
Civil disobedience, right?
civil disobedience, blocking freeways and highways, occupying government buildings, occupying, I believe, the train station in New York, occupying, even Lady Liberty, just to show that, humanity, still exists, that there is still this compassion, kindness, and universal brotherhood that extends beyond religious and racial identities. So, but also in the state of Israel, there are Jews protesting the escalation of the war effort, this constant need to pulverize the Palestinian indigenous population by the government. So there's demonstrations in Israel and in the United States, in all major cities. We were talking about it earlier: Seattle, Sacramento, Los Angeles, New York, Boston,
Riverside too.
Riverside, yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was referring to, and that gives me hope.
Dan, what are some thoughts that you have as you listen here?
So my thoughts are, we are either all of God's people or none of us are God's people. The idea that some of us are God's people is a real problem and a toxic poison to the mind. when you accept that God has chosen you or your group to be special in some way, that ends up being, that you have a special right to the land, that you have a special privilege to exist somewhere on the planet, I think really harms and hurts the camaraderie, the community, the commonality, the peace that can't exist anywhere. Even if there is a God that gave a particular people, a particular land, that can be resisted. In other words, we and no one on earth has to accept that. They could speak back to the God the same way that Abraham spoke back to God in the Hebrew scriptures. There's a story in Genesis chapter 20, which I believe to be the most powerful story in the world that has the potential to unlock the antidote to the world's problems, which is God was going to destroy two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham says, wait a minute, God, you can't destroy the righteous with the wicked. He says, that wouldn't be right. So you have, 4 billion people on earth, Muslims, Christians, Jews, considered to be a righteous man telling God, if you do this, that wouldn't be right. And that's what we need more of. We need that from Jews living in Israel. We need them to say, this isn't right, what we're doing. Even if God wants this isn't right. That's the kind of moral integrity and the moral courage that we need right now in this moment from everyone, from all of us. So even if you believe that God has given you the land, you have to be willing to say, no, we're going to share this land. We're going to have equal rights. We're going to have equal decision-making capacities. And once we do that, there's no more problems. So I think that's a big one. There's a quote from one of my favorite authors, Mickey Z, and he says, I identify myself not by gender, by skin color, by class, language, or sexual orientation. I am not the sports team I root for, the city I was born in, the religion of my parents, not even the species in which I'm classified. I certainly do not identify as a consumer, an employee, a taxpayer, or an American. In the name of holistic justice and planetary rebellion, I am an earthling. Before there were Yankee fans or Red Sox fans, there were earthlings. Before there were terrorists or pacifists, there were earthlings. Before there were Christians or Jews or gays or straights, humans or non-humans, there were earthlings. Long after all these distinctions or even the life forms that inspire them, there will be earthlings. Earthlings include the trees being clear-cut, the marine life being fished out of our oceans, the honeybees disappearing, and the animals howling for mercy in the vivisection labs. Humans shackled at Guantanamo, dying in cancer wards, cowering in fear as predator drones scream overhead, all earthlings too. It's not nearly enough to rise above the latest man-made conflicts and or differences, proudly declare oneself a humanist. In the name of holistic justice and planetary rebellion, we must go deeper to identify as earthlings and stand fists raised in solidarity with all of our fellow earthlings. So I think that is what we need to do. We need to see beyond race, ethnicity, religion, creed, and unite as earthlings. There is no one that is better or worse than anyone else. And everyone tries their best 100% of the time. Our best might look different because we have different backgrounds, we have different traumas, we have different parents, educational opportunities, different people in our lives, but everyone is trying their best all of the time, and we all deserve to live in peace and happiness and joy. Our indigenous brethren and sisters lived in peace for hundreds of thousands of years, and they didn't even have a word for work. They played on the planet. The things that we do for fun, maybe, guys go for a camping trip and maybe go hunting for play on the weekends. That's what they did for work. They got to enjoy this earth and everything within. And I think we can get back to that. Civilization has brought with it a lot of division and a lot of hierarchy, and there will be a day when we will once again live as equals and be able to live in love and peace. And I'm just happy to be here with you guys today, and I'm looking forward to the discussions that will ensue. Thank you very much.
Imam,
Thank
what
you.
are, what are your thoughts, Imam?
Yes, thank you very much. I am so happy to be with you today as well. And I want to pick up from what Daniel just conclude, that what kind of God we worship if he make a distinction, such foundational distinction among his beloved creation, that's the human being. And if that's the case, then where were they, whoever now the Jews before Palestine, before even the last century that was a destructive century in Europe, mainly? We had Jewish people from long time ago, as you know, in the history. And in the 30s, one of the British reporters, I didn't bring the story with me to give you details, he visited Palestine and the Holy Land and was going around. And then he found friends that he can relate to. Find him living with the Palestinian family. And he said, "Oh, I'm surprised and happy to see you. How come you arrived here?" He said, "Well, after World War I, my parents and so on, they brought us here, and here we are. This man gave us a little room in his farm and a little space so we can farm and get our life going." He said, "Great." And he walked around and found some chickens in the farm. He said, "Who's this chicken?" He said, "That's ours." "And what about those lambs and goats?" He said, "Ours too." He said, "So they gave you the land too?" He said, "Not yet. We are about to take it." And sure enough, by 1948, they killed that family and they took the land and the farm and everything. So it's not far history. And you're talking about people who still had the keys for their homes. And you're talking about children and grandchildren who knows where is their grandma and grandpa buried. And now the time is coming for the whole world to see it. Not only those historians, people who go and visit and see. We are seeing life as we speak right now. Our money, our support, I mean the United States and the Western world, is hardworking in killing innocent children. And more than half of the population of 2.2 million are children. So as we are talking here today in Riverside, downtown, close here, our beloved Jesus, may God peace and blessing be on his soul. He is crying because his children are dying in Gaza and in West Bank and Bethlehem and Nazirah and the rest of the Holy Land. And if we have no more humanity in us, other than thinking that those are our brothers and sisters in any faith you believe in, then you are living a life of indifference that God will question you why you were there and you did not do anything. So let's be mindful. As precious our life as is, it is the same for the rest of the people. And we are not only for the life of Muslim, Gazan, Palestinian, Arabs. We are for the life of everyone. And if we are, humanity-wise, and especially the Western world who is participating in this genocide, if we really are for the Jewish people life, we should stand to stop them from doing what's evil and what's anger God at this time. We have statement from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said, support your brother regardless, whether he is oppressed or he is being the oppressor. And they said, O Prophet of God, we help him if he's oppressed. How we help him if he is the oppressor? He said, stop him from being oppressor. You have to stop him if he is going in the wrong direction. And that where all of us are responsible in doing anything and everything possible to stop the oppressor from continuing his oppression, because one day or another, if you don't say enough is enough, God will say it in his way. And we know that God did it in many ways. And when people come to their senses and behave in that spirit of we are for humanity, like they did in South Africa, for example, and prevent that civil war that's about to break when Nelson Mandela came in here and did what he did. The same thing we have to do nowadays in Palestine for the goodness of all the people who are living there and all the people who will say we belong to that holy land. And let me conclude that by thank you so much for having this panel and this discussion at this time where so many other Christian and churches and religious institutions are not taking any serious step to voice their opinion and their belief. And if you don't take a stand, then your stand is with the oppressors and with the criminals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to briefly show you something that happened just today as part of the process of all of us dealing with our own moral anesthesia, shall we say, which is something that we all have to face, right? This just happened today. Yes. Somehow the video didn't play up there. The gentleman was holding the baby, wanting, needing to place into the morgue refrigeration system, and couldn't quite bring himself to do it right at the moment, holding and kissing the baby who was gone. What was he saying?
Did you catch it?
It wasn't clear, really.
It wasn't clear. Yeah.
But obviously,
but the language of the heart spoke anyway to us.
obviously that he is holding his grandson so tight and he don't want to let it go. Like so many moms and dads in this situation, so many people have lost all their entire families, 50, 60 people. One of the reporters, we just read it before we came in as well. He lost his last son out of his wife, mother-in-law, children, all his children, everything except his one son was spared from the previous attack. And today, this morning, he was gone. And the man, you can imagine how devastated he is. And the stories as such, it's not 1,000, 2,000. It is more than 25,000 stories of loss, lives, mostly young people, more than half of it. And thousands of people under the wreckage that they don't know. The bodies is being decayed and animals eating from them. And now more than 100,000 injured. That's what we know. Most of them are to be like suffering for the rest of their life. And now the rest of the 2 million people on the element out there where the weather is much cooler than here, and now it's raining in this winter time. Knowing that more than 3 months ago, no water, no electricity, and no fuel even reaching the hospitals. The calamity and the catastrophe really beyond description and should make us just wake up.
This lady here, these are her 4 sons killed in one day. She is mourning them today. For all 4 sons. She's saying, I have no one left. I have no one left. That's just today, and that's just one anecdote from a human catastrophe that is unfolding as we speak. This is the 7th of January. That was the 7th of January then. I'm sorry. Yes. This lady lost these 4 sons, all of her sons, one day. Finished. There are the 4 sons. Look at them, the picture of, health and promise for a future and everything. And here she is. She's having to say goodbye to them in one day.
That's a great question.
That's a very good question. Who is organizing the demonstrations that you could participate in?
We have a wonderful demonstration today, actually. Sheikh Harmoush is one of the leaders for this one, and we have lots of organizations that have signed on. This is going to be on McKinley and Griffin by Costco today from 2 to 4 p.m.
Which Costco?
Yeah, the one in Corona, McKinley.
The one in Corona.
Yeah.
The Costco in Corona on the corner of McKinley and Griffin.
Yeah.
2 to 4 this afternoon.
Yeah, 2 to 4 p.m. this afternoon. But also you can follow, in addition, I would, I'm sure the Sheikh can provide some resources and ways to get in touch with the mosque here. But I also wanted to mention there's PSL, there's PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement, there's Answer Los Angeles, and they do a lot of huge demonstrations in LA, but it's also important to be in touch with your local mosque that's organizing demonstrations here. Sheikh Harmoush, do you have any?
Well, this is here last Friday we had one in Paris. The Friday before we have one here in Taylor Mall, and there was one in San Bernardino, and so on. But really what we need to do a little further to demonstrate and contact, if you can, your representative, local, state, and federal, to tell them that this has to stop, minimum. If you want to, further say that I care about my tax dollars, not to go to criminals who are killing children. And this is no way a response for the October 7th attack by a group who lost hope. People are there, not only Hamas, they are Palestinian in the millions, inside and outside. And they've been marginalized to the point where, as Brother Shaheen said, that they've been called officially in the government media by the officials of the state of Israel as a human animal, which means justifiable to kill them and waste them. And that is a shame on our government to sponsor such things. And even for our president to just fly there as like a crying baby, not knowing what's right, what's wrong, and the rest of the world leaders to fly there and just soothe the criminals and give them support until now.
Yes, we have. Yes. So the question was, because we have our social and environmental justice committee, let's get as much of this information as we can to Adam, and let's work together. We wish we had had other religious leaders here today too, and I would like this to be the start of conversations. How can we draw in people that are not part of our discussions now? People that need to be awakened to what is happening, so that we're not just a small group sitting in a church here, in a small liberal church in the center of Riverside, but connecting with others in our city, making sure that our city also is awakening, like maybe LA is, or Kuwait City is awakening, or even Yemen, which is suffering. I saw hundreds of thousands of people marching in Yemen, and they themselves are suffering from a civil war, and they have solidarity with the people of Palestine in Gaza. Is there a single website that we can keep us up to date? And Adam's going to give us a reply here.
Yes.
And so if things are said to me about rallies and everything, I will all know that. If you go to UU Church of Riverside, maybe you can repeat this.
Okay, so at Church of Riverside.org //justice, you will find a link which will have events connected to this subject, and different ones of us. Yes, it'll be a clearinghouse where we can connect with Middle East Observer, Eye on Palestine, which is what I'm showing right here now. Other places, you mentioned some organizations. Of course, there's Answer LA, JVP, which Jewish Voice for Peace. And
That's a good one.
yes, that's a very good one. I signed something on their site recently, and you should go. They are very organized. Also, who else? There's another group too that you mentioned. I'd like you to repeat their name. There was a third group there that was.
I think it was Answer LA or
Yes.
PSL.
Yes, what was that?
So there's
It was not just three, but there was.
so there's PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement. I'm kind of listing, like, I don't know what kind of social media we all have. You know, if someone has Instagram, I'm kind of like talking about like people who have Instagram or Facebook pages, but there's PSL, Answer LA, and there is PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement. You mentioned JVP, that's a great addition. Also, if you just want to be informed, Middle East Eye covers this pretty well.
Middle East Eye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are some of the things that I can think of.
Middle East Eye. Also, yes, UIE. Correct. Also on the website that I linked earlier today, enlightenmentlegacy.net, you will find the actual lawsuit linked there that the state of South Africa, the actual case prosecution for genocide, the complaint filed by the state of South Africa, the Republic of South Africa, against Israel. on genocide, as well as other links connected with that. Raphael Lemkin's research, the Genocide Convention, all of that. Yes.
Well, actually, Adam, if you can email me the flyer digitally, flyer.
Oh.
The top here. Because I sit on the board, I represent Ward 5 of Riverside. I sit on the board of the Riverside Neighborhood Partnership.
Mm.
And so we have representatives from all 7 boards of Riverside, as well as nonprofit, as well as education, as well as business. So I can, if you send it to me digitally, I will send that out to our board and have them then send that flyer out to all throughout Riverside. That they can then, all the community organizations that they represent can give them to their community, send it out to the organizations that they belong to, nonprofits or whatever. So I can please get the word out for that particular thing.
Question about that. So we might be moving forward in the future with potentially, I don't know, but with asking for a city council resolution in support of a ceasefire. And any support that you can give to that would be greatly appreciated. And remember, a ceasefire is bilateral ceasefire. We don't want anyone harming anyone else. And that just means nobody has to die. No one has to suffer anymore. The misery can at least slow down, and I think everyone can get behind that. Anyone who is not, prejudiced or, I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't be in favor of a ceasefire. But yeah.
If it meant that happens, please let us know.
Excellent. Yeah. Brilliant. So I could reach out to Adam and Dr. Lee, and then they can get the word out, and then we'd love to have you all. Okay.
The 21st, yes.
Sort of some kind of concrete thing we could sign on to vote and support, and somebody can come and talk to us about that.
Awesome.
Yes, excellent. Excellent.
You can get as many faith-based organizations as possible to co-sign onto that. I think that will carry a lot of weight with the city.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we're talking just for the recordings. So we are talking about ways where we have people who know people in all 7 wards of the city of Riverside. How can we coordinate together, get other faith organizations in there? A resolution, of course, for a ceasefire. We have a couple of comments at the back in closing, or questions for the panel. Yes, please.
But it starts with coordination and communication. How does it go? Already a mindset that there's a delay, and you want to find a commonality which will base understanding, get to the Earthlings concept that we're all in together. Neighborhood facing. How do we do that? To try to find some common thread. I think maybe we go back to your earthly comment, your concept of the universe, and then we're all in together.
Yes.
But how because a lot of people are dying and a lot of suffering is happening. We want to figure something else at the beginning.
So a quick question was asked: how do we counter people that will place the blame on the other side in a particular conflict and say, oh, they started something first, or they did this first, or we wouldn't have reacted this way if such and such had happened? How do we break that cycle of tit for tat?
So one thing I wanted to say, whenever, these crimes against humanity have been committed, any genocide, the Bosnian genocide, Rwandan genocide, even the genocide that's going on in Gaza right now, the Holocaust, whatever it is, there's always been this vilification, dehumanization of people. So let me speak a little bit louder. So what I'm saying is, first of all, whenever genocide or crimes against humanity are committed, there has to be some ideology that justifies that. the bad guys of history seldom present themselves as these cartoonish villains where they just say, I'm evil, this is what I'm doing. They usually, can you hear me, ma'am? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah. So I got three responses. So the first one I was going to say is that just be wary that they will present it as if Palestinians are an existential threat to Israel, when the reality on the ground suggests otherwise. That Palestinians are dying in several of orders of magnitude greater than their Israeli counterparts. In fact, I don't think there's any. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when we talk about historical timelines, they tend to start the timeline at 10/7, meaning, October 7th. We need to scale it back to, the massive ethnic cleansing operations, like all the way from 1948, the establishment of the illegal siege on Gaza, the 75-year-long illegal occupation. So I would mention those things. And the third thing is I want to mention is that there's so many beautiful intersections between Palestinian rights and so many other noble struggles. For example, we didn't phrase it in that way, but environmentalism, when we talk about who are the caretakers of the olive trees of Palestine and who are the people who are wiping those olive trees out, there's footage of a Palestinian man begging Israeli soldiers, please don't cut down this tree. It's like my own child, And there are, so there's a sort of, there is this violence against nature, violence against the land that is happening from the colonial apparatus, from the state of Israel, and there's sort of a defense of nature and the natural world from the indigenous population, which we see not only in the issue of Palestine, but in so many other indigenous struggles. So what I'm saying is, just to recap, just be wary of, the typical talking points that somehow try to justify genocide. Number two, be in control of where the historical timeline starts. Don't just let them dictate, oh, it starts and ends at this one particular moment in history when, something awful happened, reprehensible, but doesn't sort of characterize the nature of the entire situation. And three, recognize that environmentalism goes hand in hand with fighting for Palestinian rights.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just
Go.
I think we need to get back to living off of the land in which we live. In other words, once you have too many people in a geographic region to survive off of this land, let's say riverside, the trees, the plants, we're going to depend on food from other lands, but other beings depend on the resources and the food in those places. And then that requires violence, because then we need to take those things for us to survive over here. So we need to get back to living in harmony with the ecosystem. And so that goes back 10 to 12,000 years ago to the Neolithic Revolution, which is when agriculture began, and that began settlements and cities and states and kingdoms and
Class conflict too.
class conflict, some with more than others, accumulation, because before we were hunter-gatherers, we traveled lightly and we didn't accumulate anything, and it was very easy to live in peace. And so I think we need to eventually get back to living again in harmony with the land. We don't know which plants are edible, how to hunt animals. We've lost that knowledge and that information, that wisdom, that understanding. And I think we need to get back to understanding that so we're self-sufficient again, because right now the food is behind lock and key, and we have to go to a supermarket and pay money to get food. And then how do you get money? You got to get to work, so they have us trapped in this crazy system of working our lives away to get food, when food should be abundant and plentiful as it is in nature. No other animal uses money to live. they're all free. They're all living happily and enjoying existence. You know, we're the one animal that's trapped in this really weird system of civilization. And so I think we really do need to get back to living in harmony with the ecosystem and what that means. And that's the knowledge I think that we need to begin to acquire once again and learn from our indigenous brethren and our sisters that have lived off the land for hundreds of thousands of years.
That's right. That's right.
No one's better or worse than anyone else. Yes.
Final comment by the gentleman in the back there. Or question if you have. Let me try to, and I'll try to repeat it too. So just, yeah. Is there any indication?
Is that a possible avenue to get Israel out of Palestine?
So I believe the question is that he's asking, is there a possible way, because of the millions of dollars that are given every year, billions, right, that are given to Israel by the United States, right? Is there any possible way in which that can be turned off, you mean? You know, it is interesting that, is there any way of stopping that aid? It is interesting. By leveraging that aid, can we use it to stop what is happening, to stop the regime over there? Well, I think something that is a hopeful sign to the question about whether this can be stopped is that the fact that the president of the United States, who is quite beleaguered right now, is having to go around Congress to continue to get funding there. The majority of the American people are in favor of a ceasefire, okay, which is like the bare minimum, right? A ceasefire for this. And it is controversial enough to where the president is having to skirt constitutional methods in order to skirt the Congress in order to keep sending the funding over there that is being used in this genocidal onslaught. It's an indication that people are waking up around the world, and there's a growing reluctance, including in these United States, a growing reluctance to be a participant in what is obviously becoming more and more horrific. Yeah, there is that. Correct. Yes.
I just say that you talked about hope, and then you mentioned about that it's increasing throughout the world. This realization, you know, and this impetus to stop this. I just wanted to share. My husband and I participated in the RCC study abroad program for 3 months in the fall, and we were over in Italy, and in the end of October, it was mid-semester break, and we went to Cardiff, Wales. And while we were there, we went down to the harbor, and the Welsh Parliament is right there at Cardiff Bay. And there was a huge, Wales had a huge demonstration right on the steps of Parliament, specifically about this, and that was in 3 weeks, you know, like after it had happened. And then in the end of November, beginning of December, in Florence, Italy, there was another huge demonstration that went all the way through the streets all around. So, I mean, and then there was the one in where I live, which is over at the Thailand Mall. So in the span of 2 months, I have with my own eyes seen or participated or whatever with grief. So I'm just saying it is growth, you know, the awareness and the unfairness and, you know, all of this. So I think there is some hope.
Absolutely. Demonstrations on multiple continents. Yes, Imam.
Yeah, I would like to conclude and appreciate your participation in this demonstration against killing innocent people. And we are aware that more than 60% of the US population now with the ceasefire against the government policy. But I am, you know, a little bit reluctant to say that really there is great hope unless the people act in a way, as the gentleman mentioned in the back, that voting is coming to different level of governments. Let's make them responsible, not only about Palestinian life or other lives, which is we care about. We don't want the Jewish people to be slaughtered or killed or abused. And this is a human life. We respect it, we honor it. You know, even I want to mention to you, our beloved prophet, at one time he was with his companion and a funeral, or what you call it, a procession passed by. Somebody died carrying him to the final destination, and he stood up and pay respect in a way. And they said, "Oh, prophet of God, he is a Jewish man." He said, "He's still a human being, and we care about." At that time. And that's where the humanity in us. And now people died in the millions under our name in Iraq, in Afghanistan, now in Syria for 10 years. In Yemen, we are not far away, and Lebanon and many other places. How many thousands of demonstrations took place? How long the people have to go out just to say save life? Why not take it to the second step? Say, no, I'm not going to vote for you. You part of this crime. And the same thing, if somebody supporting life, environment, human dignity, human rights, like, you know, our rights is to save those tens of billions of dollars that's been went there for harmful way, to harm the people, instead of spending our people here, our homeless here under the bridges, not far away from here, and so on and so forth. So really, we have to take more concrete steps to make things happening in our life. Thank you.
In the next presidential election, the last I heard. I'm just wondering if he or somebody else would be a logical strike against Biden that still seems to be in the loop with Israel.
Well, I think of any candidate that is running, we need to ask the questions. Where do you stand? There is a moral IQ test, which is right now. Where do you stand on the genocide in Palestine? That is a moral IQ test or a moral quotient test as to whether they should be in an office where they have power to either stop or to perpetuate this particular crime. Then we can see, well, then how are you going to stand on issues of the environment, on our earthling status, on the facts that of the people in our own streets dying, and so forth. Yep.
I really want to say one word here. Let's hope and pray, all of us, to consider that Palestine is the last crisis for humanity and be part of the solution.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you for coming and joining us today. And let's keep the conversations going. Next time, let's have more religious leaders here. And thank you all so much.